Joining us live now is the aviation expert and editor at the West Australian, Geoffrey Thomas. Jeff, good to see you. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
What sort of routes are we looking at here? Are they ones that aren't covered by the major airlines?
That's the core of it, absolutely. Their whole business model is around connecting dots that are currently not connected. So 80% of those 25 new routes have no service whatsoever to connecting them. They're certainly served at the moment to other destinations, but not point to point. And then the other interesting part about that is there's 96% of those routes that are served have no low-cost carrier on them. So it's a legacy airline. So Bonds is going to carve out a brand new market. And they're not talking about daily services between these places. They're talking twice a week or 3 times a week. Totally leisure airline, really, really low fares. And they're following essentially the business model of Allegiant in the United States. And they are a very, very successful airline with similar sort of numbers as far as competitors are concerned. 80% of their routes, they've got no competition at all, and they're connecting dots that have never been connected.
So what are some examples of some of the routes? And I mean, it's a pretty brave time to be launching a leisure travel airline.
It is a brave time. I mean, and they'll hit their straps as the country really starts to open up. They're not going to start flying until mid-June or July. All their routes will be operational by September. And reading the tea leaves, life is going to start getting back to normal unless we have some catastrophic new variant. Life is going to get back to normal about that, and travellers are really going to want to get going again. And the other dynamic to that is that people will probably still be reluctant to go overseas, but they want to travel within Australia. Getting back to your comment, Mildura, Sunshine Coast. There's all sorts of combinations. And there's only one capital city in those 16 airports, that's Melbourne. All the rest are regional centres, and their main base is the Sunshine Coast. And they've got terrific backing from 777 partners in the United States, and they've picked up 70 Boeing 737s at really good prices from Boeing because of the pandemic and whatnot. So there's some benefits to this pandemic as far as purchasing aeroplanes are concerned.
Oh, good luck to them. We'll
absolutely
keep watching and see how it all goes. Keen for your take on the Qantas versus the WA government war that's been going on. A huge war of words
between Korean war.
The Premier Mark McGowan and the Qantas boss, and the latest strike in that seems to be delaying the direct flight from London to Perth.
It is. I mean, Qantas, to be fair, have got to make decisions in the medium term for their crew to give them stability about where they're going to be based in their operations and whatnot. So, yes, they've got to make the commitment to Darwin to say, OK, for another 3 or 4 months, we're going to operate through Darwin because there's no certainty about Perth at the moment. And that's understandable. And so it's a decision they've got to make. But they do want to get it back to Perth because Perth was, that Perth-London service was their most profitable. 92% load factor, 94% in the premium cabin. That's money for Qantas, and they want that back. And they don't. They'll be back here as soon as they possibly can.
The WA hard border isn't actually as hard as it has been in recent months.
No,
I mean, we're seeing a lot more planes arriving now that we've seen the compassionate rule change from a few weeks ago.
We have indeed, and we've also had the shortened quarantine time back from 14 to 7 days. So yes, there's been a gradual relaxation of the rules. We've got more international arrivals, we've got more domestic. The domestic flights are fluctuating quite a lot at the moment as the airlines try and pick through the troughs of demand, because it is all over the place at the moment and hasn't settled down. But certainly we are getting more domestic traffic into Perth from the eastern states.
What about around the rest of the country where those quarantine restrictions have been lifted and the border walls are down? How are flights going compared to sort of pre-pandemic levels? Are they starting to catch up?
They're certainly getting back there. They're not back to January 2020 levels, but certainly on the way back and building quite rapidly. So I would think by the middle of the year, it'll be back to 2020 levels domestically. And then we've got to see what happens with New Zealand when they open up. That's going to be a gradual process. And then we'll start to see a strong resumption of trans-Tasman flying.
And more broadly, international travel.
And more broadly, international travel, yes. So there's more restrictions in that space. I think there's also a reluctance with people to sort of say, well, I don't want to be too far away from home. Although we've seen, for instance, on the London, United Kingdom has removed all restrictions, all testing for fully vaccinated travellers. So there's an example of restrictions being completely removed, which is good for travel.
You really need to read the fine print though, don't you? Because the rules
are
so different depending on which country you're looking at.
Well, there's a really good map, IATA COVID travel map, and you run your cursor over each country of the world, and wow, you get a big window opens up, and you have to scroll down and down and down and down to look at all the restrictions. So yes, there's a myriad of restrictions, so you have to be very careful about the fine print. I mean, most of us don't read the fine print. This time, read the fine print.
It's worth doing. And if you're unvaccinated, pretty much forget it?
Forget it. You're just not... Airlines won't carry you to start off with. Most airlines will not carry you. That's all there is to it. So it's a very tough situation for those who willingly aren't vaccinated. If you've got a medical exemption, of course, that's different. But for those who just choose not to be vaccinated, then you've got a problem.
And just finally, in terms of vaccination, heading overseas with your passport and getting your certificate, that's another set of paperwork as well, isn't it?
Well, you've got to have the app, and you've got to have it, and you've got to have your COVID international app. And so yes, it's a different certificate again that is seamless right through the world. So